Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Robots and Red Tape. As always, I am your host, Nick Schutt. Happy to have my friend Page Durham with me today. Paige, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, it's another day in paradise. Thanks for asking. I'm really enjoying this amazing weather we've been having here in the East, on the East Coast. It's normally way too hot this time of year, but
Yes.
really happy to have you here, Paige, specifically to have a conversation around education, but from a teacher's perspective, and how that and AI and teaching and from a teacher's perspective for folks that don't have the opportunity to know you yet. Will you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, and kind of how you got here and what you're doing?
How I got here. Oh, I have a very curvy path that I got here. So, I actually started teaching a very long time ago. I taught for 23 years in K-12. I was a music teacher. I have a bachelor's in music education. And in 2015, I decided, oh, you know what? I want to do something different. So I became an instructional designer at one of the community colleges here in Virginia. And so I did that for 9 years. And I was the senior instructional designer, and I retired last December. And then I became the learning game and simulation specialist at the Defense Acquisition University,
Mhm.
which was a very short term kind of thing, thanks to some commuting tribulations and
Mhm.
trials.
Yes.
And so but in 2023, when AI became more commonplace, the college wanted us to be at the forefront of that because they felt like it was going to determine kind of what and how we decided to build and assess students and what were students going to do with this thing, this generative AI thing. Um, so that's when my journey with AI started. And then since then, I've done probably, oh gosh, at this point, maybe 75, 80 workshops in both K-12, higher education, and government. And I've also did a TED Talk on AI gaming and acquisition um, for the Defense Acquisition University. So one of my after all of that, I decided I was going to start my own little business to help people learn how to use AI, but coming from the instructional design. So teaching and learning, whether it's in government or it's in business but how to use AI in an appropriate way. So that's kind of, again, it's a curvy path, but that's how I got here.
Oh, that's fantastic. And having been in education for a long time, I'm sure you've witnessed a lot of changes, in education. How has the purpose of the education system functioned? How has that shifted in throughout your time in it? And why is our current system failing to keep up with the demands of the modern world?
So I think it all goes back to standardized testing. Standardized testing was implemented to try and figure out how we could better assess the students and try to get everybody on the same level. And I feel like that was the downfall of when the teacher was allowed to do the best for each individual student. When standardized testing started taking place, it was more about memorization. Teaching, we've all heard it, teaching to the test, and then it got tied to teacher evaluations. And so then it even became more burdensome to the teachers. And so I think that's kind of where it started. And where we are now is we can get any information that we need instantly. But we don't necessarily, we have to have the skills to discern what it is we're seeing, whether it's right, wrong, and how to think critically, but also problem solve. If it doesn't, if we don't get the right answer or if we can't find the right answer, how do we break that down and teach students how to do that when it's not a 2 plus 2 equals 4 kind of answer? Does that answer your question, kind of?
Absolutely, absolutely. So standardized testing, you think, is where everything kind of broke,
Yeah.
and that was just so everybody knows. Was that under under George Bush? Was that the No Child Left Behind law, or when did that kind of really impact schools?
So that might have been when it started, but specifically, and because I'm in Virginia, um,
Hmm.
we when the standardized uh, standards of learning tests, the SOL tests, were implemented, I was that was when I was teaching, and I want to say that was around maybe 2000-ish. That sounds about right. Um, and I really saw a change in administration and, you know, the idea. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that people who weren't in education were now getting involved and they didn't really fully understand what teachers did in a classroom.
Hmm.
And there's so many things that are tied to an education. There's the social aspect, there's the empathy aspect, there's the social background, what do they come to school with, what's going on. All of those things affect what and how a child learns. And when you remove some of the that ability because now you have to have try to get everybody to the same place, that really kind of takes away from teachers doing what they had always done in the past really, really well, which was helping every student to the best of their ability without having to worry about this looming, gloomy test hanging over their head.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think that's kind of where we need to reshift. And I'm not saying that standardized testing doesn't have a place. I just think the value of it is incorrect. I think we need to really change the value and maybe just use it as a baseline rather than as an end all and be all
Right.
in determining progress for students. Because
Hmm.
not every student learns the same, and not every student is going to college, and not every, and I think that's where, trying to shove everybody into a box is kind
Yeah.
of where we started
Right.
the problem.
Because it's not just the student's performance that's tied to the testing results. It's also teacher evaluations are
Correct.
included.
And
And
school.
the better your class does on the standardized test, the better you look, and that affects your potential upward mobility, your ability to get raises, things like that. But then from what I understand, it's also tied to school funding levels.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So the better your school does on testing, on tests in general, the more money you're going to get for continued expansion of those educational efforts. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. It's a trickle down effect, right? It's not just the classroom teacher because now the administration is looking at all the classrooms because each and every test that they take is now tied to the school. And if the school gets so many fails in a year, then the supposedly people come in to try to, then it becomes the livelihood of the principals, whether or not they're going to keep their job or they're going to get shifted or moved. And so but that's not what education should be about. You
Right.
should never have to worry about your job because of a test score.
Hmm. Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. I
yeah,
I mean I agree with you because there's so many things as a teacher that are outside of your control from when it comes to the
right,
student and their mental ability to learn and sit and pay attention that day, right? Not
right,
to mention things like cell phones in schools, which has been a whole thing for the last decade,
right,
15 years, right? Smartphones in schools is even worse, social media in schools, not even to get into all of that, right?
right,
And but the whether or not the child has a, supportive environment at home to continue to do their homework, or I would assume in today's day and age, with homework being so digital and online, the internet access to actually go and do their homework is a whole other piece, right?
right. Yep.
And what if the kid doesn't have enough food to eat at night? Like there's a whole lot that
Oh,
goes into whether,
absolutely.
and that is a huge, I mean, there's a huge problem with poverty in this country.
Trust me.
Yeah, which is not what we're talking about today, but it all kind of feeds into it, right?
Right, right.
And it's all to do better on a test that is set, I would assume, at the national level. Um,
No, most of the time it's state. It's
okay.
state level.
All
So
right. So,
every state has their own set of tests that they do.
hmm. Hmm.
Virginia is called standards of learning. Every test, it may pull from some other bigger tests, but it isn't. So it's really based on the state of Virginia.
Hmm.
And there's a whole set of standards of learning. They have objectives. They're every single grade level, every single subject area. And not all subject areas are tested But basically, they start testing them in third grade, and you test third grade, fourth grade, and all the way through till you're a senior. And it
Hmm.
also can determine graduation. If
Hmm.
you don't pass these tests, then you may or may not get a full diploma,
Right.
which,
Okay.
so it's really,
And
it's
it's
really kind of frightening if you honestly.
yes, but it's also that the whole system is set up to support being able to regurgitate information. Is that correct?
Correct. Now, they've tried to change the way some of the tests are worded and how they're done so that it does a little bit better than pure memorization to critically think and problem solve. But again, it's a timed test. It's, and I will say that the test company, that makes the tests make a lot of money from these tests.
Hmm.
And so, we don't just rely on the teacher to give tests and assess and decide where a student is. Now we have these outside organizations. And, state of Virginia is a very diverse group. And, Fairfax County has a ton of money, but Wise County doesn't. And
Hmm.
so but they're tested at the same level with completely different funding.
Hmm.
And and completely different home life, kind of social area, all of that feeds into how a student learns and what they can do. And as you said, if a child comes to school hungry, I can promise you that kid's going to have a bad day and there's not going to be a whole lot of learning going on.
Yeah.
And people, and that how are you using a test to measure things like when those kind of factors that are involved. So, yeah, that's anyway.
Yeah, no, and something that you brought up before is it's all, and I just brought up is it's all set up to reinforce a system that was antiquated 25 years ago, which is the rote memorization and regurgitation of facts. And in today's day and age, right, where all right, before AI, right, before LLMs and everything, you could go online and go to like Wikipedia and read about a lot of stuff, right? There's
Right.
opinions out there for everything. And I think with AI, where you can utilize, it's not just look things up, but to have it present information to you in different ways. And I mean, I think like the uses for LLMs specifically, I'm not going to talk about AI in general, just LLMs is limited only by your imagination. Um, like we're grading schools and funding schools based on results that are no longer like they just don't matter anymore. Not really. So, what, in your opinion, do you think these schools should be teaching instead of to a test? Like, what if you could redesign the school system, right, and throw everything out that we've done for the last, call it 250 years? What do you think we should be teaching these kids in school, and what do you think the goal of school should really be, if it's not just to pass a test?
Right. Well, I think so. Here's the funny part. So, schools, even 40 years ago, were very different. There was no standardized testing, and the teachers were responsible for their classes and how well their class did. So you put the ownership back. I think the part of it is giving ownership back to the teacher. I feel like we've taken that ownership away, and because now they have these tests. So I think giving ownership back to the teacher to allow them to teach students to think critically based on that specific student, not you know, what a textbook says a 9-year old or a 12-year old should be doing, but what that 9-year old or that 12-year old is capable of doing, teaching them to think critically, but also creativity. With the rote memorization, we talk about how AI is taking away from creativity, but I don't believe that's actually not the case. It's actually the opposite. Teaching using an AI actually helps you become more creative because it opens spaces that you weren't aware of before. And I think the other piece is learning how to communicate. Not only we have to learn to communicate with each other, we need to learn to communicate with our tool, which is generative AI right now.
Mhm.
So they have to. The other thing is learning needs to be tied to, we've gotten away from intrinsic motivation as well. We use a lot of external things, a lot of external motivation to try to get students to do things. And we all know that that only lasts for a short period of time.
Mhm.
So we need to figure out a way to turn back on the intrinsic motivation. And I think that's a great place for AI to be used for that personalization. So if they're, if your kid's interested in baseball, then why not teach them fractions in baseball terminology? Now, that if you were in a classroom and you had all these different things as a teacher, that would be very, very hard to juggle, but not when you can use AI to help you do those kinds of things so that you're personalizing that path for that student and turning on that intrinsic motivation so that they want to learn because they're already connected to whatever it is you're connecting this new learning to.
Mhm.
And I think the other piece of it is now that we have the intranet, is evaluating sources. We have to teach students how to evaluate, like Wikipedia. When that was not, you could not use Wikipedia as a source on any kind of college paper because it wasn't reliable. But that now has to go much earlier in a curriculum because students are already, they have a phone. I mean, some small children have phones and are connected. Now, we won't get into the whole whether they should or shouldn't, but but we need to teach them to evaluate, like, deep fake photos. I mean, that's something that kids are going to need to know how to see a photo and understand, is that real? And how can I verify that that photo is actually real? I mean, my photo that's in my background, I have a chocolate lab. That's all AI generated.
Mhm. Yeah,
That's
I
not a
I
real.
assumed when I saw the chocolate lab wasn't moving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not moving right this minute, but again, but those kinds of things, people, that's a skill that needs to be taught.
Mhm.
So, and then when you're talking with the AI, asking better questions, that goes back to the communication piece. So, learning how to speak to other people, and also learning how to speak to an AI and how to ask it better questions. Whether, it's teaching you something, but we're all learning.
Mhm.
Everybody is constantly learning. And I think, schools, I think students are so tested out by the time they get to be a senior, their critical thinking skills, they're just tired.
Mhm.
So but because we've turned off any kind of motivation for them to want to continue to learn things, other than the other thing that looms over their head is, now I have to find a job if they're
Mhm.
not going to college.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I love the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivations and the difficulties associated with that. I think that, obviously finding things that the child is already interested in and finding ways to relate that information to them is huge. Like,
right.
my daughter's about to turn 4 in a couple of months, and I have been like working with her in the kitchen for a while, and I'm already starting to like teach her fractions, but that's not be telling her that they're fractions, but teaching her like a quarter cup versus a half a cup versus a full cup, right? And how many we need. Like, so I'm already like starting to lay some of those foundations there, relating it to something that she enjoys to do with her and I, right? Which is awesome. And I love that. But I also understand that that can be more difficult, especially the further away from the child that gets more difficult the further away you are from the child. Is that correct?
Yeah. And that one of the things that classroom teachers in the K-12 world, they see their children, they see the students very often, like,
Mhm.
every day, and so they really get to understand. But then when you move into the college world, that's totally been removed.
Mhm.
Now you're looking at a student that you may see once a week, twice a week, maybe never, because it's an asynchronous class,
Mhm.
but you still need to have that connection. So one of the things that I try to impress upon people is doing a learner profile at the beginning of a semester and collecting all of that. Well, what do you like to do? What are your hobbies? What are your things that, what is it that you want to, what kind of career do you want? And making it anonymous and then taking that information and putting it in an AI so that assessments can then be varied to, within a single assignment, can have a different subjects or different ways they want to present the subject or complete the work, but it ties back to what you've already collected about that student so that A, it gives them student choice, but they're still meeting the objective and they're still being assessed on the objective. But it's
Hmm.
a very different way. It's very personal and rather than everybody's going to take this same bio 101 quiz and
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
pass or fail. Too bad.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, obviously also varying assignments would make it harder for kids to cheat with other kids, right? Because,
Right.
you know, you can't steal your friend's homework if your friend has different homework on the same subject.
Right.
But I hear a lot about AI proofing assignments, right? And how we should, you know, find ways to like first we should ban AI, right? Um, but set actually before we go there, there's something else I wanted to bring up that I thought was fantastic that you said, which was being able to vary sources or vet sources and understand the sources of the information and how to weight them, right? Like
Hmm.
weighting, like how much credence should you give to any source? I think that especially as you look at older generations, right? So folks that were adults before the personal computing boom, right? The ones that when I was growing up to always used to tell me, don't believe everything you see on TV, right? They're
Right.
now the ones that believe everything that they see on social media, which I find ironic. But second, I mean, it's a this is a thing. This is a lesson they never had to learn. Not
Right.
really, because there were only like four sources for information, you know, 70
Hmm.
years ago. But now with so many, and I don't care what you are looking for, I don't care what your position is. There is absolutely, you can find somebody out there that believes the same thing. You can find sources to fit your assumptions, and that's a lot easier. And it's I also think it's cognitively easier for the person receiving the information because you're just doubling down on their biases as opposed to making them question their biases. How do you coach that and how do you teach that? How do you because I mean you brought up Wikipedia, but like my hack was I always used to I may not have been able to use Wikipedia, but I could use their sources.
Right.
Um, but like you know, how do you teach kids to evaluate sources and to properly weight them?
So I think that has to do with kind of changing and looking at where we're teaching digital literacy. And I don't know why that one always tongue ties me for whatever reason. But yeah, I think it really doesn't start until, I mean, I see it a lot at the college level, but I find that odd. I feel like that's almost a little
Too
bit too
late.
late.
That's too late.
Um, but now I haven't, I've been kind of removed since 2015 from K-12 anyway. And I know that that is digital literacy has now been put back in,
Good.
and they're talking about doing things like the CRAP test, so that students understand what's a good source, how do you find a good source, how do you know it's a good source, and that needs to. I feel like that has now that we've gotten that kind of started with the AI and educational technology and all of that. Now those kinds of things are a lot more frequently visited in a classroom
Mhm.
than they used to be. And I think the vetting sources, I think is you have the computer, right? So you can check what your sources are and you can make sure they're legitimate. You can figure out and you can talk about, databases and where these are coming from, or is it an article and who is the author of the article. You can look it up now, right?
Mhm.
You can look up who that author is and you can see, are they really a subject matter expert in that whatever topic it is they're writing on, or is it somebody doing a who knows, conspiracy theory,
Yeah.
whatever, exactly. So it has to you have to have. I really feel like almost teaching the students to question all their sources.
Mhm.
And I feel like, okay, so yeah, you saw that on the news, but how do you know that's credible news? Who was that person that you heard, they were talking as the expert? Were they really an expert or were they just a really good talker? So kind of like me.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Hey,
so
I understand. I'm the same way.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of where it has to start is teaching students very early on. And I think you could make it in a fun way, right? I mean, you could have things like, deep fake photos and be like, okay, how do you know this is real? And
Hmm.
you could use a historical time. You could use a historical and, have I don't know, uh, a Revolutionary War photo that
Hmm.
has a missile in it.
Hmm.
Well, and then ask them, well, what's wrong with the image?
Hmm.
Well, how do
Yeah.
you know it's wrong? It looks like they have on the right clothes, and that kind of conversation is where it kind of that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of that's where it has to start, but it
Mhm.
has to start really early.
I agree that it has to start really early, and I'll tell you my personal concerns around like teaching kids to recognize deep fake photos is that I think we can do it now, but I don't think we'll be able to do it in a couple of years. I don't think that there will be any noticeable difference that's easy. I think because the thing that you have to remember is that the AI that you're using today
Yeah, yeah,
is the worst it will be for the rest of your life. Like it's
exactly.
just going to get better. And when
Yeah,
you look at the rate at which it has been improving, I think that it's going to. And like there is just there's a whole bunch of stuff out right now about Gemini's new model for photos and being able to just replace one part of the picture instead of all of the picture and how it's doing better at that and how it
right,
Gemini does better with images anyway. Than the other LLMs out there, as far as I know. But I think yeah, they're like it's going to continue to improve. And I think that just not I don't think like it can be a fun exercise to recognize deep
yeah,
fakes and have that conversation, but I don't think that we'll be able to reliably do that with our eyes for much longer. Um,
right,
and a big thing that you didn't mention that I always do, because like you mentioned, I question every source, every single source of information. Anytime I'm consuming something, I always question it. I'd like, you know, reputation of the person, reputation of the outlet, but also, and the big thing that I always try to figure out is who's getting paid by this, right? Like who's paying for it? Because somebody's always paying for it in a day and age where you can have sponsored sections on local news where they'll just go out and talk about whatever you want to talk about for a couple bucks. Um, who's paying for it and who benefits from it, and
right.
I try to view things from that lens as much as possible because I assume that nothing is being done from the goodness of your heart anymore,
That's correct.
you know.
Yeah.
But
So, and I agree, and I think and I know you're right, and I've even done a couple things using ideogram that weren't possible 2 months ago.
hmm.
I needed some headshots for whatever, and I was like, I'm not paying $500 for headshots,
Right.
and I didn't have to.
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
I mean, and even my daughter, the only reason my daughter knew that they weren't me was the clothes.
Yes. Hmm.
She
Right.
literally had no idea otherwise.
Hmm. Yeah.
And but I think that's a good conversation too to have is when is it appropriate?
Hmm.
For example, our headshots, it's me, I made them, they're me, or like when people do things to superstars and Hollywood and sports people and then but again, it's a tool and the person who is using the tool is really the driver of the good or bad outcome, right?
Hmm.
And good for good or bad as well because we all know that technology can be used for good or it can be used for not good,
Hmm.
and AI is the exact same way.
Yep.
And we have to make sure that students understand that you as the person on the end are truly responsible for what is done with that content that you are receiving from the AI, whether
Absolutely.
it's for harm or it's for good.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. And the personal responsibility angle is not one that seems super popular in the world these days. But hey, that's neither here nor there. Um, but
Yeah,
back to something I was bringing up earlier about AI proofing assignments, and how schools are really trying to, they're trying to ban the use of AI. I've seen it in government procurement as well, where they're asking, for the contractor to define how much of their solution was written by AI and things like that. How is that a smart approach for schools to take?
No, because, well, no. It's just like trying to ban a calculator.
Mm-hmm.
Calculators when I was in high school, because, not the spring chicken,
Mm-hmm.
we weren't allowed. We were not allowed. And now not only do students have to have a calculator, most of them have their own laptop that they bring with them
Mm-hmm.
every single day. So we need to make sure that our students are prepared to use the tools that they're going to be expected to use when they leave whatever education, wherever that ends for them, 12th grade or college.
Yep.
And if we tell them that it's banned, then we are doing a disservice to the students because now they're not going to have the tools they need. AI is not going to replace people, but it will replace people who don't use or know how to use AI.
Absolutely. I
And
It'll replace some people. Not all of them, but some.
No, yeah, but it's not the large number that people were thinking. And again, replacing teachers. No, there's a whole lot more that goes on in a classroom than just teaching.
Hmm.
There's, human connection, there's empathy, there's social skills, there's all these other things that are taught that are human traits that an AI can't do. And yeah, I know I've seen some of this new AI that's, empathetic and blah 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 blah. Okay, fine. But it's still a machine.
Hmm.
And I think people have to understand that when a student leaves the educational system and they need to be employed, because as my job as a teacher is that I want every student that I teach to get a job. And I want them to have a job that they like and that they're good at. So we need to teach students how to use AI so that it becomes a tool for them in their career of choice. I
Hmm.
think the biggest thing that people think about AI and not using it and trying to AI proof is the fact that they're seeing it as the end source. Whereas I treat AI as a time saving tool, not a mind saving tool.
Hmm.
So I think that's where the balance has to come in. And I think the more you begin to incorporate AI into an assignment or an assessment or whatever it is you're doing, then you're teaching the student how to use it appropriately. You're teaching them how to use the tool, but you're also letting them know what is cheating or plagiarism and what is actually their own work that is being refined by using an AI.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, and yeah, I think that the functions you just brought up of teachers and in classroom teaching are frankly some of the time or a lot of the time more important than the actual hard skills that kids are learning in these schools, right? Whether it's I mean, math and writing, great, but I haven't used long division since like the fourth grade.
Right.
Um, I haven't really used fractions in a long time. Not like where you need to, if you're adding them together, you need to multiply them to get to the common denominators, right? Like that's just not something you have to do in
Right.
most people don't need to do in their day-to-day lives, right? And so, um,
Correct.
what are some of the administrative things that teachers are responsible for that AI, because I know from my friends that are teachers that they spend a whole lot of time after school doing more schoolwork. What are some of the things that they should be using that they can be using AI for, and how can they use it to ensure that they have more time, effort, and energy for the children when they're in class?
So I think one of the first things that, and my daughter's teaching first grade this year, so she taught second grade last year,
Hmm.
uh, is parent communication. Sometimes, whether that's your child's been great today or your child's not been good today, having and using an AI to making sure that you are communicating effectively, appropriately, and professionally, even when you are it's the end of the day, you're tired, and the kids were maybe not so well behaved. So you want to make sure that you are being respectful when you send it. So I think that's the first thing, or any kind of parent newsletter. So what's going on in class this week? A quick way of kind of taking your lesson plans, putting them into AI, and then saying, okay, create me a parent newsletter and give parents 5 ideas that they can work on at home
Hmm.
with things in their house that match the activities we're doing in class. So that's another way. Taking it to create lesson plans or maybe individualized evaluate the IEP for the students with special needs.
Mhm,
How can, those things are very time consuming and take a lot of time.
mhm,
So having using an AI to kind of help you get through those things or um, building out rubrics for like the older grades so that students know exactly what it is they're supposed to do and have that rubric that they can look at. So then they can make a determination, well, I just want to do this middle column. I'm just going to go for the C, right? But also showing them and being able to give them examples, a good example and a bad example, without having to ask a student for, hey, can I use your assignment for, the purpose of giving a good example. So I think that's a lot of it. And then changing the way that some of the material is given. So some of, now it's a lot better than it used to be, but again, some of the materials are a little outdated. So
mhm,
using an AI to update those materials and be able to differentiate based on the students in your class and the ethnicity and kind of making it so that it's customizable for the group of students that you have in your room. And all of us know that every year you get a new group of students and they're going to be completely different than the group you had before. So
mhm,
you might have those lesson plans, but they aren't going to be, basically copy and paste from year to year. So use the AI to increase the engagement by adding things in that are based on the students that you currently have. Even if it is something that you're still meeting the objective and you still are able to assess the student, but it's a lot more personal.
mhm. Absolutely. And you touched on it briefly with the IEPs and other things, but how would, and I know you touched on it before also, what about creating individualized lesson plans and custom, because again, I think how you say something is a lot more important than what you say. For you have to know your audience, you have to know what they're going to receive and how they're going to receive it. And if the end goal is to like teach kids, it doesn't matter if you're teaching them about like apples or baseballs or whatever when you're talking about math.
Right.
The widget doesn't matter, the counting does. Like how would you like, but beyond like simple things like that, how could you use AI to personalize lesson plans?
So I think a lot of that is, again, if you have a student who you know is a huge baseball fan,
Mm-hmm.
then all of their math problems should be based on baseball things. And then you already have that turned on because it's important to them. And baseball's a great example because you could talk about the stats and you could talk about all different kinds of things that don't just have to be, with baseball bat and glove. There's
Mm-hmm.
so much more to it that you can tie in. But that brings that student to especially if it's one who struggles with math, that automatically gets them over the hump of, I don't like math
Mm-hmm.
or I'm not good at math. You
Mm-hmm.
automatically remove that barrier. So now that student is interested. And once they're interested, then learning is, I won't say it is easier. I mean, it really truly is easier. Doesn't mean that they're not going to be successful right away, but the learning will come easier to them because they're now interested and they want to know why these things are the way they are. And if you have, if you were involved in music, again, music has many different things and avenues that you could tie into any kind of math and the other piece is you can tie that same subject across all bunch of different subjects to science to English to whatever subject you want it to be, and that's where AI is your best friend because it's going to tell you and teach you really quickly how to connect those things that, well, maybe you didn't think about connecting it to science. So I think that's we all have the capability to do the things,
Mm-hmm.
but the issue is, again, it's time.
Yep.
How do we use our time most efficiently? And that's where AI is the best at helping us get to where we want to be and being able to provide a huge number of things to students that are based on the student and not everybody in that age group,
Mm-hmm.
just
Absolutely.
because that was easier for the textbook publisher.
Absolutely. Well, I think if the textbook publishers realized they could sell individualized textbooks, they'd be all over it first.
Right.
But second,
Yeah.
a lot of this, I mean, we talk as we talk about like these are teachers using the tools, right? From a and I know there have been a lot of examples of how older children and college young adults and children can use AI in their lives to, help do the work. What about younger kids? Say, I know you mentioned your daughter's teaching first grade this year. Should we be introducing first graders to LLMs or generative AI in school, and how will we go about that?
So I think in the younger grades, I think it's very important for the teacher to be the focus of the AI user, rather than having the students use the AI. But I do believe that the teacher should be showing them how this AI works because in Virginia, one of the we have computer science standards and they are on AI and how algorithms work and how, those are the kind of things that teachers should be showing students in the younger grades, how this machine actually functions and what it's doing. And I think for teachers, they could do kind of phonics games. They could do kind of storytelling based on whatever the student likes, but in visuals. We with the ability to make images that we have now, we don't have to go out and try to find, all of these images and then are they copyrighted and can we use them? Is it fair use or blah, blah, blah? If we know what we want and we can make that image ourselves, then that's what we should be doing, making that image for those kids
Mhm.
because it's their image and we created it and we can share it freely without having to worry about,
Hmm.
somebody coming knocking on the door because you've now, broken some copyright law.
Absolutely.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so I think that's for younger kids, it's really the transparency of the teacher using the tool. And actually showing them and how the tool works and what is it that a computer does and what is an algorithm, what does that mean, and
Hmm.
having those kinds of conversations really early on so when they get their hands on it they already understand the back end and it's not some truly wizard, it's not really a magic wand that after all, but because that right now for a child that's what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
It's going to very much look like it's a magic wand.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes. I don't know if it's a quote. It's something I read. I forget where I read it initially. I've heard it in like some sci-fi books and that sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Um, right? If you have no idea how any of it works, it is just magic to you, which is I think is a really great way to put it. But
Yep.
and I'm with you. It's like a lot of the reason I'm doing robots and red tape is because I want to like pull the hood off and like show people the engine and how it works.
Right.
Um, yeah, I know earlier when we were talking about standardized testing at a high level, you think that we should throw that out. Well, how should we be grading teachers and schools instead of, I think standardized testing is like an easy button. Uh,
Mhm.
how should we be doing that?
So I think where it has to start is students need to build portfolios um, based on whatever it is they like,
Hmm.
and because that gives them something in the end to have in their hand when they go off to college or off to a job. I've done these things and I have them to show you, not I got a 640 on my SAT or whatever, That doesn't tell me anything. And I really don't feel like it tells an employer anything either. But imagine, thinking in terms of those students who choose to work with their hands and do. I mean, if you had a student come in and they showed you all of their carpentry products, right? I built all these things. You automatically understand the skill set that that student has. But we don't do that for other students, right? We might do that for our skilled trades, but we don't do that for our students who want to be in a corporate setting, but
Hmm.
we should, because I really feel like that's where we fall down, is that we rely on test scores or classes that you took rather than what you actually completed. So I think starting with portfolios, starting with lots of project-based learning, and so that there is a tangible product at the end, and all basing it on real world tasks,
Hmm.
not um, not these, things that I've seen where, again, like we talked about, long division. Yeah, I can do it, sure, but it's going to take me a while.
Hmm.
But again, well, what's the purpose of that? And so if we have to be able to tie those kinds of things like long division to a real world task. Well, if you're going to be X, career, then this is when you're going to need to use this. And maybe that's not for everybody. But then
Hmm.
you can have a conversation on why you need to know long division in order to do other kinds of jobs. So I think being able to tie things to real world tasks is very key as well.
I completely agree. I know that like tying things to real world tasks gave it for me when I was in school, gave it some more impact, I guess is the right word. It made it's more relevant then. It's like, oh, that's why I need to do that. Totally get
Right.
it. Yeah, it gives you some context. I also think that like teaching things like algorithms and algorithm design and what goes into it would honestly help people understand why math is important in a way that they just don't. I remember people have been very dismissive of math for a long time, but I think that again, math is one of those things that we're teaching the wrong way. I think it should be we're teaching them about a tool that they without telling them how to use it, how they might use it, and how it's used in the real world, which becomes defeatist at times.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
um, can and one of the things that I absolutely loved about especially in our initial conversation page is the highlights that you have in your business around AI assisted and human driven. Can you speak to that a little bit? Speak to your philosophy, and explain why, like the distinction and why it's so important.
Well, I really feel like it is your assistant, right? You use it, it helps you, it makes you more efficient. It's your co-pilot, right? You are the driver. You're still the
Hmm.
person putting in the prompt, you're getting the responses and you're having this conversation, but you're still the driver or the pilot. But the piece that the human driven part is, that's where the empathy comes in and the vision. What are we going to do with that? What am I going to do with this response? And then applying that, and then we are the ethical being, right? And we can see, maybe not always, we try to see the biases that maybe come from any kind of result that you get from an AI. But you are the person that is steering the ship.
Hmm.
AI is the ship, but where you choose to take the ship is totally up to you. And also the end result is, what is your goal? But that's your personal goal. It's not the goal of the AI, it's your goal. So when I'm saying AI assisted human driven, it really is trying to get people to understand that the AI is not in charge.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's a tool that you can use, but you shouldn't be making decisions or things like that. And yeah, I know we do talk a lot about and we hear a lot about the dangers of AI and the underlying tech. Um, Paige, can you speak to kind of in your experience, what are some of the things that you've seen that um, we should think about in like a more positive light as it relates to AI?
So, um, positive. Well, I think that for me, it's the creative. I feel like it created for me a space in my mind that allowed me to even be more creative. As I said earlier, I was a music person, still do music. It's still a huge part of everything that I do. But I now have the ability to create music that is mine based on either a prompt or an idea or maybe a lyric that I wrote. So using those things to enhance whatever it is I'm doing. We all know that well, TikTok. has changed a lot of the way we consume information. And honestly, people don't just want to read anything anymore. So multimedia has become a huge part of creation. And with AI, it's now in the hands of people like me who maybe weren't so, I don't know how to use Adobe Photoshop and
Mhm.
Premiere Pro. That's way above my, but now I can make things that are maybe not quite that quality, but far more engaging to whomever my audience is.
Mhm.
So I think that's part of it. I also think that, we have to model the curiosity when we're teaching students about AI and how is it going to be used and what can you use it for. And I had a conversation earlier with someone, and I was telling him I was in a hit and run car accident this weekend, and I'm fine, obviously. But the car that hit me, I couldn't get it. It was at night. I couldn't get a good description. Of course, the police wanted to know, and I'm like, it was a car. I don't
Mhm.
know. I can't tell you. So, but the next day, my daughter and I went out and we actually found the grill of the car that hit
Mhm.
me. And I took a picture of it and I put it in ChatGPT and I said, "What kind of car is this?" It said, 2016 RAV4 metallic gray.
Mhm.
So now I'm able to give that to the police and now they have this information. I could never have done that before,
Right.
but using it in those creative ways and I don't know. I mean, it's just there's so many different things that I've done that people are like, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, how did you know to do that?" And I'm like, "Because I just try." I mean, I don't even have that question in my mind or can it do that? My first question is, well, let me try.
Yep.
So, and I think that's part of that comes from being a gamer,
Mhm.
because I'm never afraid. I don't care if I fail. My
Yeah.
goal is to learn, and I
Mhm.
don't. And learning through failure is definitely one of the best teachers. And I
Mhm.
think that's also a great way to interact with an AI. When ChatGPT gives me an answer I don't like, I'm not afraid to say, no, that is not what I asked you.
Mhm.
If it wants to give you the right answer, but sometimes it's not. So
Yeah.
anyway, does that answer your question? Because I went off on a total tangent there. Sorry.
It absolutely does. I'm glad you're okay.
Oh yeah, thanks. No,
Really am. Yeah, I have one more question for you, Paige, and my final thoughts is, as yeah, I know that there are a lot of parents out there that are worried about how the age of AI is going to affect their children and their children's future. What advice would you give to parents that are worried about that? What are there reasons to worry? Are there reasons, should they be okay?
well, absolutely. I mean, there are always reasons to worry when you have children and technology because there are people who are just out there intent on doing bad things,
Yes.
period. Right? So that's not going to change. But as a parent, what I would say is have conversations, talk to your kids about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Give them examples like I just gave you of like taking a picture of a car and figuring it out. I also did, my dog had a hot spot. I took a picture of the hot spot. It told me how to treat the hot spot at home. Making a recipe from 5 things that you have in your cabinet. Those kind of conversations are great conversations that parents can have with their, children, but it's not in a but it's not teaching them, well, you can just copy and paste from your
Hmm.
school assignment. But I also believe being transparent as a parent
Hmm.
helps your student. So if I know, I mean, my daughter is older, obviously, but when she was younger, I would tell her things in order for her to know, oh, mom knows about X. So that means I can't do X with that because she already knows how to do that. And making it very clear to, your children what it's good, what you should and should not do. And I also think because you can, have a family account that is used by everyone so that you can have that. Now, of course, they can turn off the chat history, but you could have the chat history so that you'd be able to see what's your kids looking up. So now, can they get around that? Sure, they've been able to, again, it's having an open conversation, I believe, but telling your child, in my personal opinion, and especially for my kid, if I told her absolutely she could not do it, it's going to be the very first thing that she
Hmm.
did.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well, and I think a big thing for parents, and I keep this in mind as well with a young daughter, is that, right and wrong doesn't really change just because you have more tools. Uh,
right,
it's just as wrong to hurt somebody with your fist as it is with a hammer as it is with AI, right? And
right,
so, really having those conversations and keeping that open communication super important.
right.
Really love it. Paige, we get ready to wrap up. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Anything I missed?
Uh, no, I don't think so. I think I really feel like the biggest thing anyone can do is A, not be afraid to try and understand the tool. And the only way you're going to understand a tool is to use it. You aren't going to learn how to use a hammer by looking at it. You're only going to use the hammer if you pick it up and actually use it. And I think that's the key that for parents and for students is that we need to use the tool,
Mhm.
and then the conversations can take place on appropriate use. And no, this is okay to use for AI when you're doing an outline on a paper, but no, getting ChatGPT to write your entire essay, that's
Mhm.
not okay. And
Yep.
those kinds of conversations, and not just having the no, you can't use it, which is, yeah, that's an easy answer, but it's also, it's not enforceable in any way, shape, or form.
I completely agree. Paige, thank you so much for joining Robust and Red
Yeah,
Tape. It's been a great conversation and
yeah.
really enjoyed having you on. And everybody out there, thank you for listening. I hope you're having a great day.